Here's the introduction to our primer on master keying, and let's start off with reviewing. We, as door and frame and hardware distributors, must acquire, develop, and maintain knowledge about many different areas under our scope. Specific terminologies, mature knowledge of applications, even codes and standards cannot be overlooked. The more knowledge you possess, the more successful you will be at everything you do in the workplace. Basically, your ability, in fact, to monetize every project you are involved in is proportional to the knowledge that you bring to your environment. The more information you have, the more often you can apply that information. More chances to apply your knowledge leads to more sales, sales to income for the company, and ultimately income for you personally. Everyone's journey must start somewhere, and surely yours did not start with the initial reading of this text. This primer assumes a basic understanding of locksmithing principles, though one is not mandatory to read what follows. While we will not cover the basic mechanical aspect of pinning cylinders, I have attempted to cover what I consider required information and also other items important enough to include in this primer, and I hope you too will find this information knowledgeable and pull some benefit from it. Having said this, for every word in this document, there are dozens of additional words that we do not touch on. The history of locksmithing is fascinating, and it goes back for 4,000 years to be sure, with the relevant development starting in the 17th century, with substantial growth in the 19th century as it pertains to the physical hardware, such as the Yale pin tumbler cylinder. That is the Linus Yale Jr. His father was a lockmaker. The son patented the pin tumbler cylinder that we all use on a daily basis. The idea wasn't solely his. He did look back at an Egyptian invention about 4,000 years ago, which basically had tumblers in it, and bringing the tumblers flush allowed a condition by which the primitive lock, could be unlocked. And he took that idea and adapted it to basically builder's hardware, to a cylinder. There are other really fascinating developments of locks that have occurred, and some of my favorites are the Corbin master ring cylinder, the Hobbs paratropic lock, which saw the inclusion of a gate to present the easy picking of this lock, the changeable bit key lock by H.C. Jones, takes an already beautiful lock and permits the flexibility of easy recombinating when the need arises. And lastly, the Brahma lock, beautiful in its radial design, and interestingly enough, you can still buy a Brahma cylinder or Brahma lock today. I bought a Brahma mortise cylinder a couple of years ago just to have it in my collection. In the text, there are links to more information. Perhaps it's a patent or a photograph. And if you want more information, I'll show you where to find more information in a moment. For me, what is remarkable about the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries is the development of the science of how biddings are created. The discovery and development of the standard key coding system known as the SKCS, as well as the standard progression format, SPF, are remarkable advances as well. This document will focus on presenting an introduction to the science part, leaving the knowledge and acquisition of skills particular to each manufacturer, along with the histories of lock development for you to discover. And an excellent place to start this journey is the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the city of New York, and specifically the collection that they are stewards over is the John M. Mossman Lock Collection. And there you're going to see the Hobbs paratropic lock. You're going to see the changeable bit lock. They'll have probably, I believe, something from Brahma as well. And those lock advancements that occurred in centuries past are important to the study of pin tumbler locks that we're dealing with today, whether it be something as germane as a quickset, something as pedestrian as a quickset, or something as currently leading technology would be the Medico 4. All of that and everything between those two extremes is based on what came before, and looking at what came before is really fascinating. When you study locksmithing, or if you look to achieve credentialization in the locksmithing industry, you'll have to demonstrate knowledge of these old locks that you'll never see in your career. Working in Chicago for the first basically 30 years or 25 years of my career in a city that's old, that you're going to have lots of old locks, I still didn't see any of these locks, basically working on locks every day. And they're important, however, because they are evolutionary steps up to what we are working on. The principles that govern locks today are those same principles that governed those locks 200 years ago. Better said, and vice versa. The principles that govern those locks. A key is a tool used to remove a blockage. And whether it be a lock from the 17th century or a lock from the 21st century, you're removing a blockage is what it is. So the science of understanding those locks is very fascinating and gives you a better, well-rounded approach to the study of, or the science of locksmithing. Okay, moving on. Regarding, and I have a link, by the way, to the John M. Mossman Lock Collection. If you ever are in New York or in Manhattan specifically, pass by there. It's definitely worth the trip. Regarding general locksmithing terms such as shear line or max and combinate, I will not seek to define these terms or really any other in this primer. Your experience in the door and hardware industry has likely prepared you with this knowledge. If there's a term you encounter you are yet to be familiar with, I encourage you to consult the professional glossary of terms relating to cylinders, keys, and master keying, originally published in 1982, and is today known as the List Council's Dictionary for Locksmiths, and is free to review at the link that's in the article, the printed article. It's comprehensive. I have gone through that dictionary countless times. I've referred back to it because while you know what something means, perhaps you will start to work with ever-growing liberty as to what it means. So it's nice to be able to go back to the actual dictionary and say, yes, that's what uncontrolled cross-keying means. Let's move on. This primer will focus on split pin master keying, which is based on using the pin tumbler. Think Linus Yale Jr. Specifically, this primer will use Schlage as an example. Schlage is a 2-step, 10-depth system, and we will be working in a 6-pin environment. We will progress using total pin progression. We will progress using total position progression, at least initially. And we'll move on to other methods of progression after we establish a baseline using total progression. Total position progression as the way that will generate biddings. And then I'll show you better ways possibly to do it. Speaking of tumblers, other tumbler types are the lever tumbler and the disc wafer tumbler. They don't play a role in the topics that we will discuss here, but they are parts of the universe of locksmithing. And the general concepts that we're going to discuss absolutely apply to whether it be disc or wafer tumbler or it be lever tumbler. In this text, I will often quote some of the recognized experts within the locksmithing field, and there is no way that my ability to grasp the subject matter approaches their own. And I will quote these folks because I believe it serves to drive home the point. There's no better way to say it than the recognized expert. So that'll be, when I do that, that's the point. That's the reason I'm doing it. I can't drive the home better than they can. I think it's just best to use the words of those folks who have helped pioneer this field and pushed its evolution firmly forward for the benefit of us all. Please forgive any typographical errors, omissions, mistakes in calculation, as they are most unintentional. Please do feel free to bring them to my attention so that I can correct the source document. Speaking of reaching out to me, my email is there. You'll be able to send me an email by all means. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions that you might have whatsoever. I will attempt to answer them, and if I can't answer them, I'll get a suggestion as to someone who can, or I'll get the answer myself and send it back to you. Lastly, I wish to thank Aloha at large, and specifically Ralph Forrest Ball, CML, Lloyd Selber, CML, Jerome Andrews, CML, and Billy Edwards Jr., CML, for the exceptionally poignant and expert works that they have written on the subject of locksmithing at large. Their command over the subject matter is astonishing. There are many books that you can draw on when you're studying locksmithing. My library is for sure over 80 volumes, both pretty substantial and really small little pamphlets. And I have read every single one of them. And I've done so in the pursuit of obtaining credentials within the locksmithing community, and having a living library like that is crucial, because you do need to fall back on the works of experts to understand better what you're working on. So we're going to move on to the next section of this series of videos, and thank you very much.